Hey guys, it's PhoneArena. Today we're doing something a little bit different from what we normally do with our video reviews. We have here three great devices from the summer that we checked out and did our reviews on. We have the Motorola DROID X with Verizon, the Apple iPhone 4 with AT&T, and of course the Samsung Epic 4G. Now the reason why we have all three of these devices here is just because they produce some stunning looking images with their cameras. And if you haven't checked out our reviews on them, please check out the samples to see what we're talking about. So they do produce some stunning looking images, as we said, so it's only fitting for us to compare and contrast the type of quality they produce to see which one actually produces the best looking images. With the DROID X, it has an 8 megapixel autofocus camera with dual LED flash, and also boasts a directional microphone for shooting with 720p videos. The Apple iPhone 4, as we've checked out in our numerous comparisons, offers a 5 megapixel autofocus camera with a single LED flash. The biggest thing about it is that it does a great job in low lighting conditions. And of course, Apple recently offered HDR, high dynamic range photos with it, so we'll check it out and see how that also compares. And finally, the Samsung Epic 4G packs a 5 megapixel autofocus camera, single LED flash, 720p video support obviously, and from what we saw, it produces some really saturated looking colors. So sit back, we'll just take a look and see which device here offers the best for photographs. So before we jump right into talking about the photos that each handset takes and comparing them, we're just going to talk about the interface that they have to offer. So first off, the DROID X, the neat thing that we like about it is the fact that it has a dedicated shutter key. It's a nice size too, and it's a two-level system. So all you got to do is slightly hold it down to focus in, and then you push it down all the way to take the shot. Now, as far as the interface is concerned, it's a decent one. It's not the most useful ones out there, but it definitely gets the job done. First of all, on the right-hand side here, you have some options, such as the scene modes here. You could just flick and choose to see which one you want, from auto, portrait, to even landscape. There's a variety of different ones you could choose from, obviously, but it'd been just nice and easy if it was just listed as a list view, obviously. You also have different effects on board, such as you have normal, you have blue tint, there's sepia, black and white, your usual mix here. And finally, if you get into the options here, hit the menu key and go to settings, you have additional options here you could choose from, such as the ISO sensitivity, the exposure, and even face detection if you want that enabled. And of course, you have also the option to turn on to force the flash to stay on, or just keep it off the entire time. And finally, you have the button here to switch it to video mode. Now, between the three handsets we're checking out, the iPhone 4 definitely has the most simplistic interface out there. As you can tell here, it's all bare bones. You barely have any options, and this is pretty much what you're going to expect. And it's pretty much a dummy-proof camera just because it's simply a point-and-shoot camera at its core. You have some icons on the top here. You could enable the flash, turn on HDR photos. You could switch to the front-facing camera. You could even turn the video camera on, and you just simply take the shot by pressing the shutter key here. Now, the thing with the iPhone 4 is that it's touch to focus. Now, as you can tell, as I'm touching the screen, it'll automatically focus in on the object. And as you can tell also at the same time, it'll change the exposure just to better adapt to the image you're trying to take. So you really have to play around with this in order to get the really great and stunning looking images that you want. But at its core, as we've seen in our video reviews and even on our websites from the samples, that takes some pretty good images. Now, the Samsung Epic 4G by far has the best interface out of the three handsets we're checking out. Just like the Motorola DROID, it has a dedicated shutter key here. It's a two-level system too. So basically, you hold down the button slightly to focus, and you push it all the way down to take the shot. Now, the interface is definitely nice, just because in the top left here, you have all your shooting modes, and it explains to you in a list format what they are. You could even turn on the flash or turn it off. You could set the exposure value. You could even go to the settings options here to get more options for different settings on the phone. For example, you could change the setting modes to the appropriate one just to better adjust for the shot you're trying to take. You can do different focus modes as well, macro, face detection. So it's pretty much what you're going to find in a standard digital camera. You could switch over between the camera and also the video by pressing the button up here. And of course, if you want to, as opposed to using the dedicated shutter key, you could use the on-screen one right here. So the very first thing we're going to show you here and compare is just macro shots in general. The bottom left we have the iPhone 4, the top Samsung Epic 4G, and of course the Motorola DROID X at the bottom right. Now, you got to take into consideration that we're viewing the images that we took on the device themselves, so it's not going to really accurately portray the type of quality you'll see when you view them on a computer. For example, just looking at the Samsung Epic 4G and its Super AMOLED display definitely makes the colors look a lot more vibrant and lush versus what's offered on the Droid X. But when you view it in a computer, actually, it's going to be pretty much almost the same, but you definitely notice that the Samsung Epic 4G does a better job in that regard. So let's just talk about the macro shots here at the flower. So if we zoom in a little bit closer into the shot, from our experience here, the iPhone 4 did a better job at capturing the images. A lot more fine detail, especially when you don't have, when we took it regular, not an HDR photo. You could tell here real quick, you can make out all the fine detail with the iPhone 4 versus what's offered on the Droid X, or even on the Samsung Epic 4G. But we gotta say the Epic, though, does a pretty good job at a close second, and of course distant third. Probably have to go to the Droid X. And additionally, we'll show you some other colors here to show you the type of quality that each handset's able to produce. So here are some images, more images that show off the color reproduction between each handset, but also just the level of detail you'll see that each handset's able to produce. You would distinctly notice the fine detail. So with the iPhone 4, it's less fuzzy than what's offered on the Epic 4G and even the Motorola DROID X. Now these images that we took here were taken outdoors in nighttime conditions. Now, just from an overview glance here, they're pretty much going to be the same. You're not going to notice too much of a difference. You can make out some fine details that are seen with the Droid X, and even the Epic 4G and the iPhone 4. They do a pretty good job, especially when you just take a 4x6 photo. But where you do see a noticeable, vast difference is when you look closer into the image here, which I'm going to show you. So right here where the windows are, where the lighting is present at the windows, you kind of lose some of the details with the Epic 4G and even the iPhone 4 in normal mode, where on the Droid X you can kind of make out some detail to it. But surprisingly, with the iPhone 4, when you take the image in HDR, you're going to notice a surprisingly different outcome here. Now, when you compare it to the Droid X, it does a better job of producing some distinct details that you could definitely see versus what's offered on the Epic 4G. At the same time, you can notice like the color tones, it's a little bit more natural looking with the iPhone 4. And overall, though, nighttime shots, especially with HDR enabled, you can get better images with the iPhone 4. These shots here were taken outdoors, landscape images basically, and decent lighting. It wasn't too sunny, but enough to make some details with the image that we were taking. So tell you the truth, between the three handsets, when it comes to just landscape shots, they're all going to do a great job. Colors were pretty natural, even on the Droid X. Details also on the same level. You're not going to notice too much of a difference. If we zoom in a little bit more, just show you some of the details here. You could tell it doesn't lose anything in these shots. They do a fantastic job of just viewing what's in the scenery. Even with the iPhone 4, when you have it set to HDR, the only difference between the HDR and non-HDR is that it just brightens things up. It just changes the exposure just slightly more, generally to make it just a little bit more visible as far as details are concerned. But overall, all three are going to do a great job in terms of landscape images. These shots were taken outdoors in sunny conditions, so in fact, the sun was actually in front of us, so it made it a little bit difficult to try and take these shots. But the images here of the playground set, with all three handsets, you're going to not notice too much of a big difference. The Droid X and even the Samsung Epic 4G, they did a good job of producing colors. They look pretty natural, and there's a good amount of detail seen with both shots. Where with the iPhone 4 in normal mode that we checked out here, you can tell it's a little bit lighter in tones. It just made it look a little bit more overexposed, but you could definitely make out some of the details that are found with the Epic 4G and even the Droid X. But when you go to the HDR shot, you can notice the before and after look. It just makes the grass look a lot more green looking, and does provide still the same level of quality seen in the other handset. So in sunny conditions, you're not going to notice too much of a difference too between the three handsets. The Samsung Epic 4G and even the Apple iPhone 4 packs on a single LED flash, while the Droid X tacks on a dual LED flash system. So these images here were taken indoors. It was completely pitch black, and we used the flash to illuminate our shots, and these are the results we got. Now, between the three, we definitely like the Samsung Epic 4G, just because of the fact that before it takes the shot, while it's trying to attempt to focus, it actually turns on the LED flash to better gauge what kind of focus it has to be to produce better detail too. With the iPhone 4, it doesn't do that, turn on the flash beforehand. It's pretty much a guessing game as to what kind of focus it's going to try and put itself into. And as you can tell with both the Droid X and the iPhone 4, it does look a little bit fuzzy looking as opposed to the Samsung Epic 4G. Now that's mainly due to the fact that the flash is on before it takes the shot. And when it does take the shot, we still like the reproduction of the Epic 4G. Colors look natural as well. As we mentioned earlier, all three handsets have the ability to shoot in 720p, but that's pretty much where the similarities end. Now, with the iPhone 4 and the Epic 4G, we're able to have a capture rate, a frame rate of 29 frames per second in conditions that had good lighting, but unfortunately when you took them into conditions where there was barely any lighting, it dropped to 23 frames per second. With the Droid X, it always shoots at that rate of 23 frames per second. So real quick, we're just going to show you the video comparison here in 720p between all three handsets. And the quality, though, we definitely like the iPhone 4 and even the Epic 4G, just because the 29 frames per second capture rate does well in providing some fluid movements as we're panning. With the iPhone 4, though, you could see the dramatic change in exposure as we're panning around. Well, in the Droid X, it looks a little bit more choppy looking, just because of that slower frame rate capture. In outdoor conditions, though, the Droid X, there's a heavy amount of grainy looking shots with it. With the iPhone 4, though, it did probably the best job in low lighting conditions. So there you have it, guys. That's pretty much it as far as the camera comparison is concerned. We're just going to recap here, tell you what we liked and disliked about each handset. So first up, the Motorola DROID X. On paper, it boasts the better 8-megapixel autofocus camera and also dual LED flash. Unfortunately, that doesn't aid in any way, just because the quality produced by it wasn't at the same level with the iPhone 4 and even the Epic 4G. Pictures, though, were well below what the other two handsets offered. Color reproduction was slightly a little bit off, but when you consider the fact that this is a Verizon handset, it's the best one, the better ones out there on the lineup. In addition, it has 720p video recording, but unfortunately it shoots it at a frame rate of 23 frames per second. So there are some moments of jitteriness with the shots. On top of that, in low lighting conditions, it just it just looked pretty grainy. With the iPhone 4, though, it performed handsomely as far as general detail is concerned. On top of that, in low lighting conditions, it just excelled over the other two handsets, especially when you use HDR. It just manages to obtain more detail than what you can't see on the other two handsets. A very simplistic interface. We like the fact that 720p video recording shoots at a frame rate of 29 frames per second, so it's going to be pretty smooth. The only thing is just the exposure with the handset. You just got to play around with it to correctly gauge the best shot you can. But ultimately, the iPhone 4 does produce one of the best images that we've seen on any smartphone to date. And finally, you have the Samsung Epic 4G, which is probably the most well-rounded out of the bunch, just because of the quality it produces, the features, and of course the interface. It just brings it offers what you find on a regular point-and-shoot with the various shooting modes. You could change the white balance, you could even choose the ISO level settings. And of course, the quality is really nice. We like the saturated colors that it produces. On top of that, the LED flash did the best job in taking images in low lighting conditions. So it's definitely the most well-rounded out of the bunch. So if you want to check out more of the samples we took with each device and compare them, you could check out our in-depth camera comparison article at our website at PhoneArena.com.